Welcome back. So in part 1 we covered how we got here, so now let's take stock of all the various groups and tribes who will ensure the country remains a never-ending fucking bin fire. I'm just such a positive guy. Back in the day we had clans, now we've just got various groups of cunts all looking to out-cunt each other. All the while Scotland remains trapped. It's trapped in a constitutional quagmire of its own making where nobody can really move, nothing gets fixed, and everybody's covered in shite and yelling at everybody else that it's their fault.
This is your fault.
One side keeps telling us that only they can get us out of the quagmire, but are doing everything in their power to stop us from doing exactly that. And another side has nothing to offer but opposing the escape from the quagmire, even though they know that's actually not on the table. We'll get to the whys of that in part 3, but for now we have to understand the different groups that are stuck in the mud. Let's meet the tribes of Scotland's political shitemare. First up is everyone's favourite cosplayers, the Unicorn Shaggers themselves. These are the hardcore Scottish nationalists, the saltire wavers, channeling the ethereal spirit of the brutes! An embarrassing but mostly harmless sector of Scottish society that spends most of its time screaming about our colonial overlords! And how anybody saying anything slightly critical of Scotland is obviously an MI5 plant brought in to do down the Yes movement. Because they fear us! Hate to break it to you lads, nobody fears you. Except maybe your own family when you come round for dinner in case you accuse one of them of being agents of the British Empire because they ate a Tunnocks tea cake.
You dirty traitor!
Honest to God, they're the most unthreatening section of society, maybe except for those smug hipsters who vote for the Scottish Green Party, and yet these saltire-clad patriots believe themselves capable of standing toe-to-toe with the British state?
I yield! Please no more!
Meanwhile, their idea of political action is waving a saltire about and then traipsing around the supermarket shouting at an old woman who put a packet of strawberries in her trolley that just so happened to have a wee Union Jack on the packaging. How could you do this? You have betrayed Scotland! Think of the Bruce, you quizzling cow! And you may be sitting there thinking Unicorn Shaggers are solely Scottish resistance types.
Here to report a crime. Yeah. An international war crime.
The genuine tinfoil hat loonballs who it's easy to mock and ignore. They're not, there's a fair few of them, and some of them genuinely think that they have the cognitive capacity to be political commentators, but continually just moan about Scotland's colonial masters! Like, surely the only people who should be allowed to use the term colonial masters are indigenous peoples the British colonised, stole all the land and resources, and then subsequently tried to enact a genocide on. And no, the Scottish Highland clearances were not a genocide. A wee woman got her cottage burned down while most people were just forced to go to North America. Like, aye. Isn't exactly fucking ideal, but it hardly makes Scottish people suffering on par with the fucking Zulus or the Australian Aboriginals. The Unicorn Shaggers lead a political movement without politics. Fucking genius. But that leads us to the slightly warped mirror image of the Unicorn Shaggers, the hardcore Scottish Unionists.
No more Catholics!
Now, it's important to note that not everybody who voted no in 2014 is a hardcore unionist, and not every unionist is a hardcore unionist. Some of them are softcore, and that's just put a whole bunch of images in my head that makes me think I need a fucking exorcist.
The power of Christ compels you!
Just picture the Queen! Hardcore unionists spend most of their days masturbating furiously to pictures of Winston Churchill, watching a certain football team play, we all know of whom we speak, and then taking to the internet to astound us all with their wit and intelligence as they call Nicola Sturgeon "Wee Jimmy Cranky" for the 100,000th time. The dizzying heights of political culture. They make the Unicorn Shaggers look intelligent by comparison. The Unicorn Shaggers, who shag unicorns.
Nothing wrong with that. We all do it.
Hardcore unionists like to spend all their time screaming that all Scottish nationalists are vile Nazi bastards who are hate-filled bigots when it's pretty clear to anyone who doesn't wank themselves blind with a Union Jack.
It's just a film! It's just a normal film!
That they're projecting their own hatred and intolerance onto their political opponents.
That man's an imposter!
It's kinda like the orcs from The Lord of the Rings claiming that the hobbits are the real servants of evil. Nobody believes you, everybody knows you're full of shite, and it doesn't matter how you dress. We all know you work for fucking Sauron at the end of the day. And we all remember fondly how these proud Scots celebrated after the no vote. I can hear the howls from here, and can I also hear flutes? So civic, so joyous. But then you have the softcore unionists. These are your politicians, your professional classes, your collection of incestuous journalists, and your highbrow artists. Basically a big collection of I'm alright jacks who are benefiting pretty nicely from how things are and don't see the need for change.
Looks fine out there.
They do hypocrisy exceptionally well though, ignoring almost outright the bigotry and violence of the hardcore unionists.
My scope's negative, I don't see anything.
And even if the British state was out in the streets killing and eating the firstborn of everybody outside of the Cotswolds, the softcore unionists would still be bleating, aye, but I'm just not convinced. I mean, What would we do for money? Both of these unionist groups are often lumped together as the Yuns! And the Unicorn Shaggers will do anything as long as they think it will enrage them. The Yuns hate it, so we must be doing something right. As they take turns shoving claymore-shaped dildos up each other's backsides. They fear us, we do it for Scotland. And now we come to the Scottish Exceptionalists, a whole other breed of nationalist. While most of the Unicorn Shaggers display certain Scottish Exceptionalist tendencies, the true Scottish Exceptionalists are much like the softcore Unionists. They are the professional classes, comfortable people in comfortable positions with fat salaries who spend their weekends Munro bagging and bragging about how brilliant Scotland is, comparative to that nasty little racist hellhole England. A lot of Scotland's radical creatives and writers fall into the bracket of Scottish Exceptionalists, mainly because it's a surefire way of blagging yourself some nice Scottish government funded gigs and a big fat cache of Creative Scotland funding. Also puts you in with a greater chance of Nicola Sturgeon retweeting your book. Who needs integrity? Westminster might be the standard of soft power, corruption and nepotism, but oh lord, if Scotland isn't far behind. It really does play to brown-nose the SNP. We know. Although pointing that out is probably a hate crime these days. I fucking love this country. Anyway, the Scottish Exceptionalists are an insufferable bunch of wankers, usually middle class and living in the strange detached fantasy land that being middle class allows. Edinburgh. Bears den. These people have walked through the cupboard into their own tartan version of Narnia, where Scotland is a progressive utopia of compassion, tolerance and kindness. Where we treat each and every single one of our citizens with respect and care. Now obviously these people don't spend much time with the working classes, otherwise they'd know the country is actually awash with poverty, crime, hatred, bigotry, intolerance, and is generally just a big fucking bin, like a lot of other places. Of course, all of this doesn't sink in because in Scotland, we thank the bus driver. Actual words from an actual human being. I didn't make that up. I'm sure people in Newcastle and Liverpool, Neanderthals that they are, just spit at their drivers as they're getting off the bus. Thanks for the ride, cunt! It's a bit like Glaswegians and that fucking traffic code. No matter how many times you tell them, it's done to death, it's over, you had a wee quirky thing but you've taken it a wee bit too far, they keep gathering around it and praying to it like a special Glaswegian deity that hasn't yet developed its own football team. I keep going like this and there won't be any sacred cows left in Scotland. Oh well, in for a penny. Billy Connolly is a complete fraud. I'm just kidding. Put the fucking knife down. Oh, and an honourable mention goes to Scotland's middle-aged male nationalists who spend their days in misery, listening to the brain-damaged induced frequencies of BBC Radio Scotland and Call K, each day getting angrier than the last that is full of Yuns! And yet they keep going back. It's like anti-heroin. Do you want to feel continually shite but secretly enjoy it? Stick this in your veins. The next tribe in Scotland's political theatre is yes voters. Your bog standard, everyday, normal member of the voting public who voted yes in 2014. Average Joes and Janets. Nothing really to say about them, but you do get a hefty dose of Scottish exceptionalism with your standard yes voter, and a large contingent of them also seem to think that any criticism of the Scottish Government is akin to blasphemy.
Are you a heretic?
And that Nicola Sturgeon is the greatest figure in political history and can do no wrong, which creates its own issues which we'll explore further in part 3. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Sturgeon has a time machine and it turns out she was the one who actually went and freed all them slaves in America. It's just a her thing to do. But that leads us to the SNP Loyalists and Nicola Sturgeon's Praetorian Guard of Pampers wearing fuckwits. As discussed in the previous video, a lot was revealed in the 2014 referendum and a lot of people switched on to the bullshit of the Scottish media, which was good for a time. But as the years have wore on, the SNP Loyalists point blank refused to accept any criticism of the SNP. To them, the Nicola Sturgeon party is beyond reproach.
It's perfect.
And any media outlet reporting anything negative about the SNP is just another example of more SNP bad. Part of me doesn't blame them. The Scottish media has the prestige and integrity of an open-air public toilet in Bangladesh. But this leads to a situation where Sturgeon's core vote, as well as many Unicorn Shaggers, just refuse to see the SNP as anything but glorious.
Praise be.
Allowing Sturgeon to break promises, drop manifesto pledges, miss targets, overrule her own party's internal democratic protocols, get in bed with big business, sell off her renewable energy on the cheap, etc.
etc.
I have a cat that when I lift it up to the mirror will just not look at itself. It point blank refuses to acknowledge what is right before its eyes. It's a bit like that. Normally, until very recently, every U-turn or change or broken promise was met by the SNP's online criticism defence team, led by recently deposed ex-Glasgow councillor Mary Hunter. close friend and confidant of Nicola Sturgeon. Her and her ilk would wade out into the digital world to inform everyone that what you're seeing with your own eyes wasn't actually what you were seeing with your own eyes. You had to actually take into consideration this hastily drawn up batch of bullshit, which clearly explains why Nicola Sturgeon is always amazing and how Mary Hunter is always right about absolutely everything. What a loss you had to endure there, Glasgow. What a loss. Nicola Sturgeon could stand up and say that Scotland had never actually been part of the EU, and you'd have SNP voters clapping like seals. She's right. We've never actually been in Europe. Like, what is Europe? And of course, inside the SNP campus, Sturgeon's own Praetorian Guard, a crop of insufferable dickheads fresh out of uni that have seemingly infested every aspect of the party and subsequently set about cleansing it of anyone with a brain capable of independent thought, and anyone who could possibly put the SNP's future at risk. And by that we mean their spot on the gravy bus. Utilising American identity politics, this coterie of bastards backstabbed their way into positions of influence, gerrymandering the SNP's National Executive Committee so that they and their mates were in charge. And they helped get all the troublemakers expelled. Troublemakers in this case who were people who wanted the SNP to deliver on its election promises of a second independence referendum. Apparently getting independence, the supposed driving force of the SNP, turns out to be a real threat to SNP dominance.
How odd.
So everything has to be kept exactly as it is to keep those fat salaries and expensive claims just rolling in. These little bastards' takeover of the SNP machine was so vicious and sly that it can only be compared to the Red Wedding in Game of Thrones. Although, minus the blood, I think you'll find the perpetrators of that particular bloody massacre
Victory.
were considerably more honest than Nicola Sturgeon's K-pop superfans. And the final tribe to be thrown into this melting pot of insanity is the Scottish media itself. A useless network of mostly privately educated British state propagandists masquerading as impartial journalists and broadcasters. The sole motivating factor of the entire machine seems to be to get paid handsomely while ensuring the entire nation of Scotland is relentlessly battered into submission by a media machine telling the populace how shite and worthless it is, over and over and over and over and over again. Have you tried taking a drink? Have you tried a drink? Take a drink, take a drink, take some heroin as well, go on, do it! Actually, that's probably too honest for the Scottish media. No doubt the press barons were hoping that we eventually get so depressed at this never-ending deluge of sewage that we just enact a collective suicide, allowing the Tories to move in and turn the entire place into a fucking theme park for insufferable posh cunts from London.
The avocado Soto fair.
Think the Edinburgh Festival, but everywhere. The Scottish media are an embarrassment to Scotland and to the very notion of journalism itself, but because they're so transparently partisan, and the fact they burned their bridges with huge swathes of the population back in 2014, it means that Nicola Sturgeon's SNP now run around unchecked and unchallenged for eternity. Yay. So now we know how we got here and we know the tribe's in play. On to part 3 in this exceedingly upbeat trilogy. We'll explore why the next few years are going to be absolutely fucking unbearable. Like and subscribe before I have a fucking aneurysm.